Welcome in, you guys. I'm your host, Andrea, with From Mrs. to Ms. I have Tiffaney joining me today. You like to go by Tiff. Welcome to the show, Tiff. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So I just wanted to let you guys know exactly who she is. So this is Tiffaney Florentine, a powerhouse life coach on a mission to help successful women in their 40s find true fulfillment. Over a decade ago, Tiff did something bold. She cashed in her 401k, she left her cushy management consulting career, and never looked back. She knew she was meant to empower millions of women to transform their minds, bodies, and lives, and she was ready to follow that calling no matter how wild it seemed. From the outside, Tiff had it all. She had a thriving business, a loving wife, a high rise in downtown Chicago, but beneath the surface, she felt stuck, always striving, and never truly happy. When her marriage unexpectedly collapsed, it was a wake-up call that forced her to confront years of unresolved trauma, from a turbulent childhood to military service and everything in between. Not finding what she needed in traditional self-help, Tiff crafted her own path to healing and fulfillment, the Fulfillment Accelerator Method. Today, she shares her unique roadmap with women everywhere, helping them break free from limitations and create lives of joy, connection, and purpose. Tiff is the real deal, here to guide women to the happiness and empowerment they've been craving. Wow. I'm clapping. What a great introduction of you. And that sums it all up right there. And I loved your story, which is why I was like, I want you to come on and just talk to everybody because you have been through it. You've been in it, right? So that is a lot for you to go from where you were and all the things that you've been through and to where you're at now. I just love the story. So let's start at the beginning. Okay, so your life seems somewhat perfect until it wasn't. So what exactly helped you get up off the couch that one day and say, that's it, I'm doing this, I am moving forward? How did it start?
Excellent question. Excellent question. It wasn't actually the couch that I was sitting on. After my marriage imploded, I found myself literally on my bedroom floor, curled up like a snail in a ball, like feeling that pit in my stomach, the pressure in the chest, like bawling my eyes out. Honestly, all of that trauma, like from being part of the hustle and bustle society, go, 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 achieve, be successful. Then on top of that, being a woman, do everything for everyone else. That all coupled with childhood trauma, just trauma stacking up throughout my life, we just get to a point where that one last thing, that one last traumatic event, which was finding out my wife cheated, like seeing it, who was then my business partner and best friend, like my person all in one.
Yeah.
So when that happened, it was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
And so that sent me into my rock bottom, which was an absolute, and it was like the greatest gift of my life because that's where I started to find myself.
Wow, I love that. So let's dig into that a little bit, if you're okay with just being vulnerable with us and just so because I'm sure so many people have been there and they've been through all of these different things and they do stack one on top of the other at times. And then we just kind of sit there and we don't know what to do. So I love that you were like, fuck that, I'm out of here, right? So when this happened, and I saw you said it a couple times and you just said it again, that you actually saw it happen with your ex-wife, that she is. So I know I'm being personal here. Did you physically see something happen or and I'm sorry
with a best friend. Yeah. It was the worst possible way you could find out. Like with a best friend. I mean, it wasn't like graphic, but it was like they were touching hands and I caught up. Like, I was like mind blowing. Like I was in that moment and I jumped up. I'm like, I'm gonna go. Like I literally rushed out of there and I found out, and it's just like my life came crumbling down.
Were
after
you
that point.
there in the room with them and then it just started happening? I find this fascinating because I think it happens all the time. Twice.
After we worked on the marriage. Yeah, it was ugly.
So did you ignore it the first time?
No, when all this basically when all of it crumbled, I told myself I was going to show up and do all the things I possibly could and honor the marriage. And so I proposed couples therapy. We kept going to therapy and she kept saying, I'm not sure if I want to work on this. So we were in this weird limbo for a few months. And then I found out a second time that it was still continuing. And then I basically filed for divorce and split all the assets and did it all via email within 3 weeks. I was on the move. We got that done. And honestly, that was a gift because a lot of women get stuck in these relationships, not necessarily should I stay or go, but they know in their body they need to go, but they think, oh, I should stay. They get
Yeah.
caught in in this limbo for years or decades. Mine
Mhm.
was a gift because I saw it a second time. Like the
Yeah.
boundary was broken again, and so I could just hit the gas pedal out of there versus wonder.
Yeah. Well, because how do you go back on something? The trust is gone. And no matter how hard you try to get back, you just can't.
Yeah.
So right. And so I think a lot of people, you're right, they do sit there. I know I did in my marriage. He didn't cheat or anything terrible like that. But it was just that feeling of guilt, a little bit of like, how can I break this up? What does that look like? And fear. What is my future now going to look like? How am I going to do this on my own? I think people go through so many different feelings and thoughts, and that hinders them from actually doing exactly what they need to do. Most cases, I think, very difficult. So you mentioned throughout your stories, I loved your Instagram. I loved looking at, there was so much personal stuff in there, which I really loved and felt connected to. Um, and so I really enjoyed looking at, and you went through a lot of different traumas. I have them kind of listed here because I don't want to miss anything, but you were in a childhood family riddled with addiction. Your dad died in your arms at age 19. You were in Iraqi freedom deployment. You were getting hunted in the military for your sexuality. And then your marriage imploded.
Mama Universe was like, "You will go through it all and you will be a healer." And I was like, "Okay."
But you Yes, and look at though where you come from all of that. Like it's really mind blowing because
Thank
sometimes
you.
we go through one little thing, we have a crappy day, and we're like, I'm done, I'm out, And to go
Yeah.
through all of this, it made you stronger, which is
Mhm.
fascinating. So,
Mhm.
can you tell us a little bit about some of that stuff, if you don't mind talking? I just want the audience to get like a feel for you and where you came from, so they
Yeah.
really understand what your transformation has been like.
Mm.
So okay, you had the childhood family ridden with addiction. What kind of addiction are we talking?
Alcoholism, and also there was just like abuse in the household. Really, like I honestly blocked out the majority of my childhood. I remember very, very little, but there was definitely some physical abuse, parents doing their thing,
Mm-hmm.
alcohol abuse. I
Yeah.
moved about 7, 8 times, like, before I was 15, so
Oh,
that was
that
a
was
lot, but really just lots of substance abuse in the family. So my dad passed away as well as 2 uncles. There's just a lot, and there's still a lot going on with that.
yeah.
Yeah, lots of abuse of substances.
And your dad,
Emotional absence. Like,
just like
really, that's what no one was there.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, and when your dad died in your arms at 19, was that from an addiction?
Well, I'm sure that played a big part in it. He actually got cancer when he was 45 years old and gave me a call and said, "Hey, we were closer when I was growing up. I would go over there every weekend." And then he had like different wives in the picture. We get distant. And we're at a point where we were distant. And he called me. He said, "Hey, can you give me a ride to chemo?" And I was like, "What? To chemo?"
That
And I
that
was
we
like,
told you?
"Yeah." He's like, "Can you ready?" I was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "And I'll just like help you." I was literally 18. I didn't know I was supposed to go away to college, very blue collar. So I'm working in a factory full time, going to community college. And I was like, well, so glad that I was there, right? Like what a gift. And I literally moved in with him within the week. And I took care of him for 7 months, basically by myself. I was the primary caregiver. There was a little bit of help, but I was there every day and saw him go from about 165 down to like 115. And he passed away in my arms when I was literally 19 years old. So it
Oh
was
my gosh, Tiff, I'm
the
so sorry.
most, thank you. It was the most difficult thing I've ever been through. The most absolute, just the most like difficult's not even a good word. Like the
Yeah.
gravity is just not there. But it was also the most formative experience. And to be honest, like it was so beautiful at the same time because I got to see him pass into that next into heaven. Like I got to be in there in that moment when he was peaceful and out of pain. And also the greatest gift came from that, like for me, because that is now my anchor experience.
Mm,
Whenever anything is hard, Andrea, I just say like, I got through that.
you
I
did.
can fucking do anything. I
Yeah.
got through that. I have no idea how I stepped up and did that as an 18, 19-year-old. I have
I'm
no
right.
idea, but I did it.
Yeah.
And so I'm just glad I was there. Like I was
Yeah.
supposed to be there.
And I have to believe it connected you in some way with him. I'm sure of sharing in that experience,
Yes.
the tough times, and you start reminiscing. So I imagine that happened as well. And then getting hunted in the military because of your sexuality. My son is bisexual, so I know what that's like.
Yeah.
I'm super supportive, and I can't imagine what it was like for you at that time. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What
Yeah,
happened?
absolutely. And just to be completely honest, like the military, I knew I would join because it was something larger than myself. Always been part of a larger mission. And I left weeks, basically signed up weeks after my dad passed. I was just running from that trauma, which took me into the next.
What's next?
Again,
Yeah.
I'm glad I went to the military too. When we think about being hunted in the military, it really shaped who I am. It really shaped this, like up until the last 4 to 5 years, I didn't figure out how to release that energy from my nervous system. So showing up in my power as a lesbian and owning that had been really, really hard for me because of being hunted. So I was a military cop, and there were
Okay.
people in my unit, Office of Special Investigations, in the same cop unit. And they
Okay.
would follow my girlfriend and I around on our days off. Or I was deployed to the desert and the calls are tapped. I can't see anything. I had one 15-minute call a week, and I got called into the office and essentially almost kicked out while getting Airman of the Year 2 times. And the only reason I didn't get kicked out is because my girlfriend had more rank than our commander at the time and was like, I'm gonna call my dad. And it was don't ask, don't tell era. So you could be gay, you just couldn't be seen doing the gay things. And I got accused that I was like out in a club doing stuff. I go to bed at 8. That is a lie. I didn't do anything. Right. So that it was just so it's crazy to say that out loud, that
Mhm.
even happened. I don't know. As
It
I'm
is.
saying that out loud, and I'm like on the brink of the election results. I'm like, is it that crazy? Like we just keep going back and forth as a society. And so, yeah, it was really turbulent. And over the years, realizing that trauma and carrying that in my body, it's allowed me to claim the label as being gay, being a lesbian, and just stand in my truth and my power and bring that authenticity to other areas of my life. So it's such an important part of my story. And also, my
Mhm.
brother's gay, and so was my sister. So it's like, yeah, yeah. So there's
That's
raise the
surprising.
three. Way to go, Dad. Yeah. He created his own pride parade.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing that. I know that's not always easy. I just kind of wanted them to understand where you're coming from
Yeah.
before we continue on. So, in your transformative courses on helping financially successful women cultivate meaningful relationships, that is amazing. Why do you choose to focus specifically on financially successful women to help transform? And what three core principles do you kind of aim to impart with that?
Hmm. So, financially successful women, it's interesting because when we think about niching down online, who do we want to serve? Essentially, I want to serve women in this world that have a big mission and that are leaders and that are here to create an impact. Because what
Mhm.
gets me out of bed every day is the ability to create a ripple effect in this world. So, when
Mhm.
I think about I've worked with a lot of authors, change makers, activists, entrepreneurs, executive type leaders. I get to work through them and see the ripple effect. And so when I try to call those women in, I
Yeah.
was saying high achieving women or high performing women. The thing is, even when we're high performing women, we have trouble claiming that. Like I could look at a woman that's an executive of a Fortune 100 company or a woman that's like retired from the military, total badass entrepreneur now. And I'd be like, oh, you're high achieving, right? She's like, and so when I say financially successful, I'm working to get the most tangible term like, oh, yeah, I have a lot of money. It's
Yeah.
easier to
Yeah.
resonate with that. And oftentimes, with being a successful woman climbing the ladder, right, and having that influence and that power, money comes with it. So it's a way for me to call in my ideal client that is a woman with a big mission and powerful in a
Yeah.
way that's more accessible. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, no, I love that. And do you feel like sometimes because they're in that status, they're a little bit more willing to buy in, if you will? Because I think, right? Yeah,
I
I
work
guess
on
buy in.
yeah, like literally, and I work on good to great transformations. And I've had other businesses that focused on people that were like homeless or off the streets, like working in a factory. I've done that. And that's great to
Yeah,
take people from like despair to okay. But I found like where I light up the most and what holds me accountable to be in my power and my light and to do the work on myself is working with the good to great transformation.
I
And so
love.
when I have the most fun is literally with like activists, authors, like these big, powerful women, again, because I get to see them create more impact.
Yeah. Why do you think that they are so? Like you said when you were like, "Oh, you're like a high quality woman." I think is that the term you used? High
High
quality.
performing, high achieving,
Okay. Yeah.
successful.
And they're
Yeah.
like, I wonder what that is. And maybe you, I'm sure you
Yeah.
kind of know why they're so afraid to just be who they are. Is it because they're one person one way, but deep down at home, they're just totally maybe insecure and vulnerable and in a different state than they are at the office. They have to be this big person all the time at the office and in charge and leadership and all of those things. Does it scare them?
There's a consistency across my clients that they have a core wound
Hmm.
of not being enough and not feeling seen. And so that creates this incessant hustle to keep climbing.
Yeah.
And so I believe that with that incessant hustle, if I were to say, oh, yeah, I'm high performing, I'm successful, I've made it,
Yeah.
right? Some people think that's going to stop them from driving, but really it comes back to that core wound of like, I really don't feel like I'm enough. I'm never doing enough. Every night I go to bed and I feel like I did not do enough, even though I was busy all damn day.
Yeah.
And so if I am at peace and I'm content and I did enough, then all of a sudden I can claim I'm successful. I'm a
Yeah.
badass. But there's just this constant internal battle around self-worth.
It's across the board. I mean, I can't tell you, I do interviews, all day long on self-worth and loving yourself and finding yourself and all of that. And it's incredible to me how huge that topic is at this moment.
Yeah.
I mean, that should be the phrase of the year is, love
Mhm.
yourself. But it just feels like it's just become so much more prevalent over the last few years. And I'm sure it's our society and all of that
Yeah.
stuff that contributes to it as well.
Mhm.
Okay, so how much of what we go through, this was kind of my own personal question thrown in there. How much of what we go through in our childhood, whether good or bad, do you feel that like it shapes who we are today and what we're willing to accept in our lives? And where do we even begin to make that change? I know we can go to therapy and a coach, but like what is more of the detailed, integrated stuff in there that we have to kind of push through
Yeah.
and get through? Where do we begin?
Yeah. I believe that it has an extremely significant role in shaping who we are and how we show up in this world.
Yeah.
Specifically between the ages of 6 and 10,
Okay.
we go through core traumas that really we experience a big trauma or two between 6 and 10, and that's really when our body, our meat suit, I say, is hardwired with that pattern.
Okay.
So it's like we basically see the world in a way that's overly sensitized, right?
Mm, yeah.
For example, I had a client that was sitting in church at the age of 7,
Hmm.
and she knows she's gay. She knows it. And it's like super Christian environment, and the pastor's up there just saying that like you are terrible if you're gay, you're awful, it's disgusting, like all of these things, right? And so
Hmm.
here this girl is knowing she's gay, sitting in this church pew. She's going, fuck, I'm not enough. I'm not safe. I don't belong here. I must shut up, keep my truth in me, stuff it down in order to be safe. And so her meat suit was like, yup, keep it down, keep me safe, right? Think about the lump in the throat, like the pressure in the
Oh,
chest,
yeah.
these things we carry throughout our lives. And so that core wound is how she sees the world. Oh, I'm in relationship. Ooh, I can't speak my needs. Stuff it
Yeah.
down. Stay safe. If I speak my truth, I am unsafe.
Yeah.
That's the core belief.
It
And so that
travels.
shapes how she shows up in work. It shapes how she shows up in relationship. It shapes everything.
Mm,
Until we discharge that energy from the body, we're stuck in that same perpetual loop. And so you're talking about how do we get out of that? What do we do? That's the $1,000,000 question that I spent the last 8 years working on full time because I was slamming my head into the wall. It wasn't the marriage the marriage was the catalyst for the work, but then the relationship after that was the same. My needs weren't met. I was in small spaces because when I was 7 years old, I was driving around. My dad was driving around. I'm in the passenger side. He's wasted.
mm.
Here I am, hoping we don't go off the road. I'm steering as he's falling asleep drunk at the wheel. I'm not safe,
Wow.
right? He doesn't see me. I don't feel seen. I'm like begging for his attention always.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what I did in relationships?
Mm.
Oh, you don't have any space for me? Here I come. You can't see me? Yeah, I picked up the same thing and I was just stuck in this loop. If I look back, I was always with emotionally unavailable people. I got cheated on in every relationship. I started dating people that were with other people. Woo, my favorite.
Because you
Yeah,
felt safe, you felt comfortable in that
it was
environment.
normal.
That's all you knew.
It was normal. My meat suit said, up, if they can't see you, this is normal. This is what we match to. And so I kept that same pattern until I finally cracked the code on how to break it. Right. And this is where I specialize with women now is like working with them at that I'm done moment where they know they're in relationships where their needs aren't being met and they know they shouldn't be there, but they stay, right? They
Yeah.
keep going back for more. And so these high achieving badass women are like, I need to go. I'm embarrassed. I'm frustrated. I'm ashamed that I'm still there. I was in that place. And so what I learned over the years, I had the luxury of working on myself full time for 8 years because my gym was running itself. It was
Okay.
such a gift, right? So
Yeah.
I built the roadmap we talked about because I
Yeah.
had the capacity and
Yeah.
just kept digging in. And so what I learned about 6 years ago is I started digging into different methods to release the energy from the body. And so what I
Okay.
learned is that the traditional self-help model is focused on from the neck up. We're going to go to therapy and talk about it. We're going to read the books. We're going to listen to the podcast. The majority of the work in the self-help model is the neck up when really our brain is this little thing, but our meat suit is running the show. Our
Yeah.
body gets addicted to that roller coaster and that high from repeating our patterns, and we just keep matching with it. So I can know the things, but embodying the things is how I truly change.
Interesting.
And so once I release that energy from the body, then I have access to my brain to break the pattern.
And that's the hardest part, and finding that place to break the pattern so that you
Yeah.
can move forward. And we get so stuck and fearful, right,
Yeah.
of doing that, because that means you actually have to come out of who you are,
Yeah.
right?
And it's interesting
The
too that
therapy to do to really, I've done all that the books, you're reading the books and they're talking to you, Tiff, they're talking to you, and it's just, and you find yourself, especially on social media, of course, once you start looking at one thing, they all start coming through. And I would find myself reading these little clips that come through all the time, and you're like, that's me, and you're just
yeah.
craving more and more information. And I think sometimes it's just knowing you're not alone, that it's not, this
Mhm.
can't be just for me, right? Like there's so many
Mhm.
people out there that are going through everything else. And so that's where I think people they get to that point where they're like, okay, I got to do something. And that's where they find you.
Yeah, ideally. And really what you need the knowledge and you need the embodiment piece, which is releasing the energy from the body. I can't stress that enough. Like
Yeah.
releasing triggers and traumas from the body. And that's what I've been deep diving into because that is the core component that I was missing for so long.
Hmm.
And so when you think about releasing, essentially, like I would be in the same relationship pattern because my body's drawn to it unless I can release that energy and then have space to respond versus react. Now I've
Mm,
done so much work on my body that when I am in a space where my needs aren't being met, I feel it and it's repulsive. I can't
interesting.
stay in it versus
Yeah.
before it would be like repulsive and then I'd go back for the high, the
Yeah.
dopamine fix. I'd go back. I would ride the roller coaster because the high was worth the low, but
Yeah.
now it's
It's not
not.
right.
My body is like, well, wait, I can't even tolerate it. Like there's no draw to it anymore.
Yeah.
And what I learned is that the embodiment piece, like you can really do it a couple of ways. Like I've heard of people doing EMDR. I've heard of
Hmm.
people doing hypnosis, ayahuasca, and then I walk my clients through a trauma rewiring method, which I learned from my mentor and then took a course to do it, which takes 1 to 2 hours. And so
Okay.
what I want to share with everyone is like, I take my clients through this process in 3 to 5 months
Yeah.
and they're completely changed. And the trauma rewire is this much of it. And it's literally 1 to 2 hours. And you
Wow.
don't even have to rehash all of the muck. Like in EMDR, they're like, let's talk about your trauma and how you were abused and all the details, or in therapy. You don't even need that. You just need to go to the body and have somatic practices to release the energy from the body. And so
Wow.
if I could just, the healing journey doesn't have to be decades.
Yeah.
We're
And I
always going
think
to be
that is
healing.
the fear, that we're like, I'm going to be stuck in
No.
therapy for years and I'm going to have to dig deep and get, all the stuff that I'm dreading talking about. No, that's pretty cool. I love it. So you've mentioned it a couple times, and I saw on your Instagram, you talked about people's picker being off. I say that all the time. I'm like, my picker's just off. Number one. And then you also talked about your meat suit, which you mentioned a couple
Yeah.
times. Can you just kind of tell us a little bit about both of those things?
Yeah. And when I think about the people picker being off, it's what I articulated with my pattern, right? My meat suit is fired up. I was drawn to places where there's emotional unavailability.
Yeah.
And so,
Your meat suit's your body, you're
yep,
referring
your
to.
meat suits your body. And so that hard wiring, that like basically getting wired between 6 and 10, like I mentioned, like love to me was somebody not being there. And so
Mm,
when I felt that despair, that pit in my stomach, and then the high when I got a little bit of attention, That's
Yeah.
also what I was looking for in relationships. And so my people picker was not good, right? Because I'm addicted to that roller coaster high.
And it knows it. So it's like, oh, we know where to go here on the scale. We're going right back to the same place.
And then
Yeah.
healthy love didn't feel good before. If my needs were met and it wasn't this up and down, then it was boring and I was not drawn to that.
And what an
Mhm.
incredible feeling it must feel now to be in that place where you said you can't even tolerate it. You know, you
Yeah.
can't stomach it. Like that alone must just be like mind blowing, you know?
It is.
It's so self you know, like you just
Yeah.
gratifying. That's the word I was looking for. Self gratifying. And just you feel like, wow, I've done
Mhm.
this. Like that,
Yeah.
you've put in the work
Mhm.
and you've done it. That is pretty freaking cool. I love that.
Thank you.
So, one of the topics you teach is breaking free from toxic mental loops.
Mhm.
Let me just break that.
I don't know why that's going off. Sorry about that.
Okay, no worries. So, you ready? Okay. So, one of the topics you teach is breaking free from a toxic mental loop. So,
Mhm.
can you tell us a little bit about what that entails and maybe share a few practical steps that someone can do to start freeing themselves of that? Really,
Mhm.
get out of that.
Yeah, just to keep continuity with that same situation, I was in a relationship post-marriage. I repeated the pattern. My needs weren't being met. And here I was in a toxic mental loop where the woman I was dating did not have the capacity. She was still tangled with her ex. She was working 80, 90 hours a week, and she wasn't doing any work on herself. There was a lot of other things that just like weren't good in that relationship.
Yet you found
But
that
I
attractive
stayed.
when you went with her,
But I
right? In the beginning.
stayed.
Yeah.
And so the toxic mental loop was me. This is embarrassing to admit, but it's common with high achieving women that are stuck in these patterns. But I felt so embarrassed and so much shame because here I am building this epic company. I have employees, I have a huge mission, yet 80 to 90% of my brain was stuck worrying about, overthinking, ruminating on what she was going to do. Is she going to work on herself? Is she going to do this? Is she going to fix that? I was stuck in that mental loop and I couldn't get out. Like it was an obsession. Like it is embarrassing. I was like checking the text, checking her Instagram, contacting her. What if I said this way? What if I did this? And that was that my body doing this. I was like drawn to that.
Mm.
It was absolutely terrible. And so when I think about the toxic mental loop, that was what I was working to get out of. And before doing that work on the body, I was just stuck in that. What I
Yeah.
learned, that was a 4-year stint of back and forth. It was ugly. Like I'm embarrassed to admit the nuance. 4
Oh,
years, but
holy
it
shit.
propelled me to do the work even more. And what I learned, if I'll leave this with the listeners, took me 4 years to learn this lesson. Every moment you spend worrying about what that other person might do, might not do, whether they're going to work on themselves, every moment you spend worrying about them, you are hiding from your own work, just hiding. And so now every time I'm thinking, oh, my needs aren't met. Will she do this? Will she? I'm like, what's my work?
Yeah.
What do I need to do?
What do you need to do? Do you
Oof,
think
it's
we
been
often
hell.
go into those type of relationships? I know it's kind of because it's a pattern, it's normal for us, but also like somebody like that, it made you probably seem a little bit more normal. Seeing the way she was, I would assume, you know what I mean? Like you're going, oh my God, this feels like out of control, and you're seeing all of these things, and it somehow normalizes you a little bit. I would think you would feel a little bit less like, oh, I maybe got my shit together a little bit more than she does. I think
Hmm.
people feel that way when they try to find somebody, and it makes them feel a little bit better about themselves. Do you find that?
I think for me, it was everyone has their own shit, like their own childhood dynamic playing out. And like here I was doing the work, working on myself, and like, why isn't she doing this? But like, we both had our own work and we're on our own path and we match up with people that have the same amount of work to do. It's just a different kind of work. I was
Yeah.
anxious. She was avoidant. I was
Yeah.
chasing her. It's
Yeah.
so like we're never farther along than anyone. Like we all have our own work, but if our needs aren't being met and we've communicated them, go away,
No way.
but we
It
stay
seems
in these
so easy.
dynamics.
It seems so easy. We know it's not. We know it's not as easy as I wish it was. I wish we were
Yeah.
all wired to just be like, no, bye bye. Right.
Right.
But
Right.
I know we've all been there.
Yeah.
So I read this quote on your Instagram page. I did stalk your Instagram a little bit. It was really fun. I think people should go look at it. You have some really great fun videos. So really cool. And
Thank
your
you.
photo is killer. Uh, Okay, so the quote was, the more we allow ourselves to cry, the greater our capacity to love. So why are we so dang afraid to be vulnerable and to cry and ask for help? Why did you kind of put this quote out there? What does that mean to you?
Well, the majority of us haven't learned that crying is a superpower, that feeling our feelings is necessary, right?
Yeah.
It's always as we grow up, like fit into this box, keep going, be successful, push it down, like grind it out. And so we've learned that pushing through is the way to get ahead, and pushing through, there's no space for emotions. And so learning how to cry is literally a life skill, but we just
Yeah.
haven't learned it. And when I talk about capacity to love, if we think about the deepest depths of pain and despair and just like muck, like crying way down here, and we think of joy way up here, the more that I feel that pain, the deepest sorrow, all of that, the more I can flex it down, that improves
Mhm.
my capacity to flex up, like this
That makes
emotional resilience. I can only feel love if I can feel the pain too. And anything outside of that, the less I feel, I'm just kind of cruising along and I'm numb. Like, think about people that are on antidepressants. They don't feel joy and they don't feel pain, right? Like, that's the point. We keep this homeostasis. And so the more we can flex downwards, my God, like the more we can flex upwards. And think about it too. When you've had a big cry,
yeah.
like a big cry about something, no one's ever come out of a cry session like, whew, wish I would have left that in there. I said that you come out softer and more loving and open.
Yeah. No, you're right. You do. You feel you're like you've released, you've let it all out. It feels so good.
Yeah,
And
we've
I
learned
guess
that that's weakness. And I believe feminine energy and like feeling our feelings is the ultimate superpower.
yeah, we all try to be so tough. Yeah, I like it. Big cry. Okay, so let's shift gears, talk about your health and wellness aspects of your coaching, because you do that as well. So you take a holistic approach. You support clients with their mind, their body, their soul, not just in relationships or overall health. So let's talk about the holidays coming up. This is perfect time. We've got Thanksgiving coming up and we've got
Mm,
Christmas coming up. What tips can you kind of share with with my listeners and your listeners to enjoy the season without the worry of holiday weight gain?
mm. Two things that I would recommend, very tangible actions. One,
Mm-hmm.
this is what I recommend to all of my new clients, is to implement inspired stillness every single morning. Meaning take 1 minute or 2 minutes. Literally commit to a time that is 100% doable, does not create stress. It's like a hell yes. And
Yeah,
you could just keep doing it. So
yeah,
most likely 1 minute or 2 minutes, you're like, oh, it's doable. And
yeah.
just sit in stillness. Literally flop your feet on the side of the bed and breathe for 1 to 2 minutes. Just like be with yourself.
I love it.
That could also be like pup cuddles in the morning. It could be paint by number. It can be anything that's mind and body immersive. It could be reading for 2 minutes. But take 1 to 2 minutes without picking up your phone. That is
Okay,
one of the most
that's
potent
huge.
habits you can possibly implement in this life to have more peace and contentment and to show up how you want to show up. Because you're
Yes.
creating space between you and the world. You're creating a buffer to respond versus react. That is the juice, that
Mhm.
buffer to be the person you want to be. So that's number one, inspired stillness. It's not meditation. It's just immersive. Do what you want to do. Okay.
Yeah.
Number two, I love this one, is to use the space to make decisions you love very tactically. If I love cake on Thanksgiving, pumpkin pie, if I love pumpkin pie on Thanksgiving, I'm going to ask myself before I eat the pie, how many pieces of pie would be delicious for me? How many would I just love? Old me might have eaten 8 pieces, just eating them like potato chips. New me, I'm like, okay, I could eat 2 pieces and that would be really delicious. The third, I'm probably gonna get sick, right?
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
use the space to practice self-inquiry. I eat 2 pieces of pie. I make love to them because I'm there with them because I have more space.
Yeah.
And then actually before I eat the pieces of pie, I define the number and I also ask myself, can I love that decision afterwards?
Mm.
And so use the space to ask yourself one more time, will I love this decision and can I love it afterwards?
Ooh,
And
the
so that's one of the
afterwards.
most potent things to do with food, with movement, that kind of
Mhm.
thing. It's just self-inquiry and doing the things you said you're going to do and love the decision after.
Great tips. That's huge. The after ones. I know we all do that
Mhm.
where we're like, yeah, I want that. I want that. And then after we're like, I do that. So you got to be okay with both.
Totally. And basically what I'm talking about are there are two energies in this life. There's flow and there's
Mhm.
resistance. Resistance is stress angst, frustration, irritation, anxiety, just a bunch of muck. Like, I can't eat the pie, right? And then there's flow, which is peace, calm, contentment, ease, right? And all we're looking for is to find flow with our decisions. Not eating any pie would be like frustrating. Eating all the pie, I would feel awful. All we're trying to do is find the middle ground.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with a pie. Like, find the piece that the number of pieces that is your truth. And I know this sounds silly around pie, but this parlays into every aspect of life.
It does.
What is the amount that feels good for you?
Yeah.
And then own that. And so when women start to practice the self-inquiry with that space, and then start to say what would feel really good, and then they do that thing, that's where the self-trust muscle is built. And that's what we start to use in all aspects of life. Like, do I want to hang out with that person? Not for 3 hours. One would feel good, right? That kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, good stuff. So if you could go back to, I think it was 2013. I'm not sure if I was totally right on that, when you made your bold decision to cash out your 401k and aim high. I was like, no, don't do it.
It was wild.
Taxes.
Oh, it was wild.
What advice would you give to that version of yourself? Would you second guess anything at that point that you're full on board?
I wouldn't change a thing. Yeah. I have always trusted myself to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And so I trusted myself to figure it out when I cashed in, but I would just tell myself to have more fun, like find more peace along the way. Yeah. Right? But it's also like, I needed all of that to get here. So I don't know that I would change anything. Yeah. I'm going to think on that more, but I wouldn't change a single thing because I needed all that angst in my body. Yeah. I needed every single experience to get to that breaking point. And that breaking point, it was my gift, because I was put on this earth for this work to flow through me. Like, I know I had these experiences to do this. So I don't know what advice I would give younger me in that situation.
Yeah. Just go for it. Yeah. Don't worry about it. Because I think you just get so frustrated with the situations that are going on, and you are so lost in it, and it feels so terrible in the moment, and you don't see yourself coming out of it. You know, you're like, oh, when am I ever going to feel normal again? When am I ever going to love again? When am I ever going to feel anything again? And then you do, and you look back on that and go, wow, what a lesson.
Totally. Right? You know, I would tell my younger self to celebrate the wins more, and I'm working on that now, because we tend, as like high performing women, we climb these mountains, but rarely do we look back and be like, good job. And so I've really been implementing self-compassion and cheering for myself over the last couple of years. So I would have just sprinkled that in more, because truly we all want to feel love and belonging, but the only person that can truly love us at the way we really need love is ourselves. Yeah. And so I'd be like, love yourself harder along the way.
Celebrate your wins.
Yeah.
I love that. That's great. So before we go, I have to finish the episode, of course, with discussing, girl, you were an American Gladiator. Yeah. So tell us, you were a finalist, right? Like second. Ooh, second place. And I watched a little on YouTube. You were badass. Okay, can you just tell us a little bit about the experience? I think that was so super cool, and I think everybody would really love to hear about that and how it changed you for the better.
Yeah, absolutely. It was quite an experience. I was working at Deloitte at the time. I was a management consultant. Okay. I was working over 80 hours a week, and then I randomly tried out. It was several months of auditioning, and essentially I went from 80, 90 hours a week, being in a software implementation go live in Michigan, the most stressful position I've ever been in. More stressful than being deployed during Iraqi freedom, by the way. Then I go to Gladiator Arena, and I'm playing with 39 other contenders. Literally 14,000 women tried out. I get selected, and I'm playing in Clippers Arena for roughly 6 weeks. I ended up being on 3 episodes, and I'm just around like these high energy, really rad humans, and Hulk Hogan and Layla Ali. I'm like, what is this? It was wild.
Cool.
And so after that experience and being around that energy, I just came back like in some sort of post-Gladiator depression. And I was like,
you feel so different, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, please go for it.
No, I was just saying, I guess it would feel like, you know, what meant so much more to you before you did that, the job, the working the 80 hours, making sure everybody's taken care of, like working the grind. And now you go and do and have this experience that's like so freeing, I would have to assume. And then you end up coming in second. And so now you validated who you are and that you are this American Gladiator. I would think going back to Deloitte would be like, you know, a little underwhelming. Like you're like,
underwhelming indeed.
Who I am. That's what I said.
Yeah. I always knew, like, I came back and it was underwhelming, and I always knew I was destined to make a big impact in this world. And every single situation I've had, I just keep narrowing down how. And Deloitte was
Mhm.
very formative, and I needed that experience. But after coming back from Gladiators and the show started airing, I was like, wow, people look at me like a leader. Like, I've known this before
Mhm.
from like other situations, but like they're really looking at me for hope and inspiration around
Yeah.
wellness. And I was like, I don't know what I want to do in wellness, but I need to get there faster. And so on a whim, I applied to grad school. I was like, well, I'm gonna bomb the GMAT. I'll do it fast. I can get in full time at Ohio State in a few months. And so I was like, I'm a
What?
veteran and a female. I can bomb the GMAT. And I literally just like left Deloitte and went to the full-time grad program to focus on healthcare at the time, as well as strategy, and got my MBA.
Incredible story. Just a couple questions regarding the Gladiator. Just the process, like when you left your job, were they okay with you going? Like, how long did you have to be gone for? I always wonder this. You know, when I watch Bachelor or some crazy show, and I'm like, you know how long they've been gone for? Do they have a job when they get back, or what was
Yeah,
it like?
it was really funny. My project manager was amazing. She's one of the best managers I've ever had. Her name is Michelle. I still remember Michelle Brown, just epic. She was like, whatever you need to do, I got you. And then Deloitte was, it was so funny. They're like, we're going to make you a recruiting puppet. They put me on the recruiting page and talked about like work-life balance, which
Look
that
at that.
that's not a thing, but I was like, you do what you got to do. And so they were supportive. I had a little leave of absence. It was a good marketing tool for them. And really it
Right?
came down to my project manager creating that bandwidth, and she was always someone that had my back, and she was just incredible.
Wow. And then how long before you did the show before it actually aired?
So I came back and the show started airing, I want to say within about a month or so. And I had to keep quiet as the episodes aired. Like, did you win?
I
What happened? Yeah.
Yeah, what can you say? And I know now, like, I think, you know, some of those shows, Love is Blind or whatever, they could go a whole year before
Yeah.
they, yeah, from when they actually film it to when it airs. That's a long time to keep a secret like that. I mean, I feel like I would just want to be, I'd be hinting all over the place. I can't keep a good
It was
secret.
so hard. So hard.
I bet. And then they're like, man, you didn't tell me that. It's so fun, though. Well,
Yeah.
congratulations on that. That's such an awesome experience.
Thank
So
you.
cool. So before you go, first of all, I want you to let everybody know where they can find you. Give us some of your social media handles, anything you want them to know where they can find
Yeah. Where I spend the most time on the social medias is definitely Instagram. So it's Tiffany.Florentine, and my name is unique,
you. Yeah,
Tiffany. That is the best place to reach me and to consume the content. So please give me a follow.
I love it. Perfect. So I do like to do this little game from Mrs. to Ms. Would you rather? It's just 10 easy questions of would you rather do this or that? All right, number one, would you rather go on a silent meditation retreat for a week or party at an exotic beach location with no time to rest?
Meditation. Just talked about this
Do not
yesterday.
party. All right, number two, would you rather have an extra hour every day to work on your mindset or an extra hour to unwind and relax your body?
Mindset.
That's good. I think that's really good to take that time, right? To really do that. It's not about the relaxing, it's about getting in order. Number three, would you rather get a new life changing insight every week or just one big breakthrough once a year?
Every week.
Every week. Every week. Number four, would you rather work with a client who's wildly ambitious but stubborn or a client who's open minded but constantly doubtful?
Ooh. I think wildly ambitious and stubborn. I think my
Let's
military
go.
cop could handle that client.
You can push through You can push through it. All right, number five, we're getting a little personal here. Would you rather blindfolded surprises or playful role play?
Ooh, blindfolded surprises.
Fun. Number six, would you rather have the ability to read your partner's mind during sex or be able to control their sensations with just a touch?
Ooh, sensations with touch. I
Now,
love
I've
that.
seen your girl on Instagram. She's a hottie.
I definitely had her in mind when you asked.
Oh my goodness. Okay, number seven, would you rather be trying new positions or mastering the old ones? I'm on a pattern here. I'm sorry.
No,
Yes.
no.
You know,
Yeah, adventurous. I said new, adventurous over here.
number eight, would you rather give up your morning mindset routine or your evening self care ritual for a whole year? Which one, if you had to give up one?
I would give up the evening. That's
The
hard.
evening.
I'd give up half of both.
That's a great idea. I like that one. Number 9, would you rather slow dance in the living room or spontaneous dance moves in the kitchen?
Spontaneous in the kitchen.
Fun. My last question, would you rather start every day with a cold plunge or end every night with an hour of intense meditation?
Oh,
Intense. Yeah.
cold plunge.
Cold plunge, have you done that?
Yeah, I recently did my first cold plunge. I don't know how I just did this. I was like sitting with ayahuasca last year, and now I'm doing the
Really?
first cold plunge. Like I go big, and
I don't know if I can do. How long do you have to sit in there? A minute? Is it that long?
I think I did about 2.5. But it all depends on the temperature. Mine wasn't that intense, but it's exhilarating.
What's it supposed to, is it just supposed to, I don't totally understand what it's even supposed to do for you. Just open you
I
up?
don't have the science of it, but I know it's like invigorating. It definitely wakes you up. And essentially,
Yeah.
it just drops you into the moment. When you're in that intense cold, you have to come to your breath. You have to have that mind control and really sink in. And
Oh,
so I love that challenge. I can't be in my mind going, this sucks, this sucks. I'm going to die. I'm
yeah.
okay. I'm okay. I'm going to breathe through it. And so it's this, it's like mindfulness, like I'm
Yeah.
dropping in. It induces.
Interesting. I feel like it would be like running for me. Like people say when they run, it clears their mind. They're just so free. For me, all I can think about is when do I get back?
Same.
Like that.
Yeah, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a reason for this? Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Tiff. I really appreciate it. I loved your story. And like I said, I loved your Instagram and everything that you're doing. It's so great. And I hope everyone will go check it out and see what you have to offer. And if you have any last words, any little piece of advice for the listeners, would you give us anything?
I'd rock out that inspired stillness. I think every woman needs a minute or two every day just to get closer to herself and to her truth. And it
Yeah.
makes a huge difference.
Wow. I think that's the title of my episode here, Inspired Stillness. I'm
I
stealing
love
it.
that. Well, thank you
Well,
so
thank
much for having me.
Absolutely. And to everyone listening out there, thank you for joining us. And you can find me on any major streaming platform. I'd love to hear from you at my email at info@frommrs2ms.net. We will talk to you guys next week, and you have a good one. Bye.